The next thing is the standard deviation. First of all, the standard deviation is a measure of dispersion. And I have no hesitation in saying that among all the measures of dispersion, standard deviation is the most widely used measure. The reason it's widely used is that, first of all, it's standardized. Standardized means that it's unitless. And the second is that every value of the data is filtered through the formula. So this is treating every observation through its process. Like in case of range, if you remember, we take the highest and the lowest. Yeah. What about the other values? We don't pay any attention to them, do we? You have seen range, haven't you, before the break? So you only treat the maximum and the minimum number, but all the middle ones you don't give any attention to. But in standard deviation, we are treating every value in the formulation. All right. And secondly, the standard deviation shows us, we can explain the concept of standard deviation with the help of normal distribution. So it means that imagine you have the data, you plot it, right? And I take 95% of the data, 95%. Is within the range, within the given range. So we have a data and 95% of the data is fully cohesive, fully linked to one another. Only 5% is going out of this range. Then we can say that the standard deviation of the given data is low. So there's nothing to worry about. So the standard deviation shows how far are you from the average value. Larger you are away from the average value, higher would be the standard deviation. Do you get my point? So for instance, if you remember the example we had, I can do it right here. Oops. Remember, we had 3 teams. Do you remember? And I might have forgotten, but I think it was 2, 3. And this was 2, 8, 10. And this was 3, 3, 3. Yeah. So in this case, the mean was, so the average was 3. And then the standard deviation. The standard deviation is This one here, it's STDEV. Now, if you observe this, am I sharing it with you actually? Yeah, it is. Yeah. If you see this, larger you go away from the mean value. You see here, this is the highest deviation. Can you see the average Manchester United? The data, when you plot, is going far away, much farther from the mean value. For Chelsea, the data is away from the average, but not far away. For AC Milan, the data is exactly on the mean itself, riding on the mean. And you can see that here, the standard deviation is 0, which means what? No dispersion. 0 means you can completely trust the data. The data has the highest possible consistency. And farther you go away from the mean values, look, 8 is far away from the average value. Higher would be the standard deviation. And when there is a deviation, but not too far, not life threatening, in that case, the standard deviation would be comparatively lower. Yes, sir. Yeah, it means that they are, well, first of all, this is the imaginary data. And this data is historic data. Historic means this is not your forecasting. This is observed data. It's historic. So this data you see from the past records from some sports magazine, and then you plot it, and then you want to see, hey, let's see. Not only we check which team is the strongest in the league, but also which you can trust the most. Imagine you want to bet. Then what will you see? Not only performance, but also you want to see which team you can trust more on. Right? But I'm not saying that you do it. It's just for the sake of, you know. So here you can see that. So this is not a forecasted values. These are historic values. But of course, if you have a sample of 100 matches of each team, if I toss the coin once or 2 or 3 or 4 times, and head and tail are coming equal number. No, let's say I make 4 tosses, 3 times come head and 1 times come tail. I cannot conclude that the chances that in the next throw toss head will come is 75%. I can't say it. But if I toss the coin 1 million times, and if the coin is not defective, I have a good reason to believe that head and tail will have equal chance of occurrences. The data is very large. So if the data is large, all the teams, let's say last 100 matches, then I would be in a better position to comment. But then I can even forecast. I have seen the historic data of 100 matches of these 3 clubs. And tomorrow, they all are playing. It's a 101th match tomorrow. Then I guess what? I have some good scientific homework, research estimate for the tomorrow. Are you with me? Last 100 matches, AC Milan, 3 goals average, standard deviation almost 0. I have a reason to forecast that even tomorrow, AC Milan would score 3 goals. I may be right or wrong, but I have some scientific data-backed estimation. You get my point? But not based on 4 matches, of course. Yeah. So this is standard deviation. And see what the standard deviation shows. First of all, in the standard deviation, every value is treated in this formulation. Are you with me? And secondly, these are standardized measures. It's not scale. It's not a unit. It's a coefficient. All right. This is why the standard deviation is most widely technique of using calculating the measures of dispersion most widely. There are quartiles which I ignored for the time being. I will come back to this. And then the range you have done, but the most widely used is this standard deviation. Did I use, by the way? Oh, yes, I did. Yeah, we did standard deviation. Of course, we calculate. For example, here the firm return, it was a variable that how you calculate the return on the firm's stock market return. It's nearly zero, yeah? It means that the companies which we took their return on the stock market performance was fairly consistent. All right. This you can calculate. I'm giving you some homework that you do by yourself. Even though I know you're adults, you're not kids, but there's no harm in doing homework. So you take this data, marks in maths, finance, economics, and you are supposed to calculate mean, median. You can ignore quartile range for some time. If you can do, it's great. If you can do, it's wonderful. All right. But if you can't do it, it's not a crime against humanity. Mm-hmm. Basically, I can spend some time right now. So you will do it. Quartile range is very interesting thing. First of all, let me ask you, if you take some sample or some number or some phenomena, how many quarters we have? How many quarters we have? 4 quarters. The first quarter, yeah. And then comes second quarter, third quarter. But normally, if you have the same starting point, so if you have something, let's say, this is a pitch, football pitch. So this is half. So this is first quarter. And if you start from here, 0, first quarter. 2 quarters means half. Then comes third quarter here, 3 quarters, and then the full. So basically, we're interested in the third quarter and the first quarter. Yeah. Is it okay? So the third quarter is how much, if you want to say something for the 75% of the data. Like for example, if I ask you to stand in a queue by the order of your age or your marks, and I say who are the 75% people, I can take any parameter, yeah? And then I take 25%. So if I take 75% of the sample, and then I take 25% of the sample, and the difference between them will be who? The middle 50%. So the quartile range shows the middle 50% of the students. Can I ask you one thing? Have you ever been interested in knowing the performance or anything about the middle 50% of something? Do you know how the American universities are ranked? The American universities are ranked based on interquartile range. They don't get highest ranking based on how high performers they have. They see the average, they see the third quarter performance of its students in the past. You know, let's say last 20 years, let's say University of Washington, last 20 years, what has been the grades of the 75% of students? All right, the average grades of 75% students of finance. And then they see the average grades of 25% students of finance. And then they find what is the performance of the middle 50% people. If that average marks of middle 50% people is higher, the ranking is higher. Because it's not the top or the bottom which represents the university students' performance. It's the majority of those 50% people in the middle. Are you with me? There's an average, and then 25% on this side, 25% on this side, middle 50% people, how they perform. That shows the overall performance of some phenomena. So it means that the interquartile range shows how well the middle 50% people are performing. Let's say this is University of Washington. That the performance of middle 50% people, their grade is 9. And when I say University of Texas, their middle grade is 8. Then I have a reason to believe that the average performance of have I done something? Then I can say that the average performance of middle 50% people, which is more representative. You see what? Whenever you want to see the welfare of a country, do you see the how the rich people live in that country? Do you see that how the poor people are? Of course, we consider, but we always look at how the middle class people are living in the society. Why we say that India is a destination for the foreign investors? Because India has a huge number of middle class people. Above average, the upper middle class, below average, lower middle class. 25% above the average, 25% below the average. And that shows, so even if you want to make some investment decision, remember, you open a company and you're planning, hey, where should we invest? Which country we should go to? All right, look at the population or the size of the market. Highest size of the market, lowest size? No. Interquartile range. How many people, what percentage of people are living in the middle class of this? What is their average income? If that income is high, it means they can afford your products. And hence, it's a good opportunity to invest. So therefore, in many cases, we don't take the highest or the lowest numbers to make some comparison. We see the middle class. And when we want to find this case, then we use the quartile range. Make sense? I never did, but I try to do it here. What if I want to find the quartile of this data? Let's call it Q1, yeah? I hope I'm successful, but if I'm not, then please. Quartile. Is it quartile? Say again. Here I'm using average. No, I. Oh yes, I know what I've done. I should have specified which quarter I'm using. Is it semicolon difference? There we go. Yes. Look, why there was an error, because I didn't specify, am I taking first quarter or third quarter, yeah? So now I specify that I want to take the data would be same, but I want to specify first quarter. So when I specify it, there's something coming up. So this is Q1. So if I extend the formula here, and if I want to find third quarter, for example, there's no second quarter basic. Second quarter is the middle, basically, median, yeah? Remember median is 50%. And 2 quarters mean 25, 25, 50. So there's no point of second quarter finding. So, and here again, we use quartile. Hopefully it works. I just randomly tried the, let's call it third, maybe. Oh, there you go. Yes, it works. I didn't know that it works like this. So for example, in this case, remember, Q1 is goal. Unit is absolute measure. Q3 is a goal, absolute measure. Then comes the size effect. How can we neutralize the size effect? Well, we can. How? Find the ratio, find the coefficient. And how do we find it? The formula of quartile range, you can see here. Where is it? The formula of quartile range is this. Q3 minus Q1 divide Q3 plus Q1. Okay. So let's see how much is the quartile range. Let's call it QR, quartile range. So what I do here, if I don't use the brackets, my answer would definitely be wrong. My calculation can be as correct as possible for Q1, Q3. If I don't use the bracket, I'm definitely going to have a wrong answer. So use the brackets very carefully. So Q3 minus Q1, bracket close, divide, again bracket, Q3 plus Q1. It means what? There is 0.08 difference between two matches which Chelsea plays. Which match? Where their performance is 75% and 25%. And here, the gap between their 75th performance and 25th percentage performance is this. But here, the gap is 0. There's no gap. If I slightly replace Chelsea, Manchester United, and AC Milan by the countries, let's call, they are not clubs, they're not goals, they are some countries. Then this example would be more in the context. Let's say this is country B, country C, country D. Then I can say that for the country B, the gap between the highest 75%, the wealthiest 75% people and the wealthiest 25% people, the gap between these two extreme, the upper middle class, the person who's sitting here and the person who's sitting here, their gap is 0.08. 0.08 means 8%. 0.08 is 8%. It means that the richest and the poorest, not richest and the poorest, the person who is in the upper middle class category and the lower middle class category, their gap in terms of wealth is 8%. Whereas in country B, the gap between the wealthiest, the 75% richest people, if you make people stand in the queue and you say, hey, 75%, okay, you are the richest 75% in the league and you are 25%. So the person who is on the one end of upper middle class and the lower middle class, their gap is 70%. The person who is belonging to lower 25% class is 70% poorer than that person who is in the upper middle class of this country B. Whereas in country C, there's no difference. It's a very utopian world. No gap between rich and poor. We all equal. There are rivers of milk and honey. Everybody's equal. Isn't? Do you know the concept? Now, the concept is that in many cases, you're not interested on the extreme values. You are interested in the, so for example, you make a consumer survey. I bring it down. You are interviewing people. You want to find what is the majority of responses. What is the overall opinion of your middle class respondents, people who come in the middle category? Then you are using quartiles, by the way. The problem with the Q1 and Q3 is that these are absolute measures. They're not size neutral. The good thing about QR is that it takes away the size. So for example, your sample can be compared with your sample, even though you have different respondents, you have different number of respondents, but to bring the comparison, we can't use Q1 and Q3. We need to find out quartile range. You might have 500 people in your sample, in your interviews. You might have 50 people. All right. So then what I do to bring your sample compared with your sample, I calculate quartile range so that the size effect is taken away. Oh, okay. So I think we have now discussed about quartile range as well. So now I expect from you that when you send us this homework, you should also calculate basically everything. I want to take you to correlation. Where is correlation, by the way? If you see this article, there are some hypotheses. You don't really have to understand this paper because that's not your, this may not be your field. It's my field, finance and stuff. Look at the hypothesis. I write H2. There'll be H1 also, but let's not go that back. Well, we can actually, if we wish to. Yeah, there is H1. The firm performance affects capital structure of the firm. So what I'm trying to say is that the company's performance have an impact on their capital. My question is, what could have made me say this thing? When you make some kind of, when you give a statement, yeah, it's a statement. The statement is, the firm performance affects capital structure of the firms. Did I get some kind of divine enlightenment when I was sleeping? Some God came, woke me up, and then he said, Shab, you know what? Firm performance affects the capital structure of the firm. No, there was no such prophecy. Because before I reached this conclusion, I did review of literature. The review of literature, when you read diverse literature, you would be in a position to create some theoretical relationship between variables. When I read this literature, maybe majority of the literature said that firm performance affects capital structure of the firm. You know what? I've been diplomatic here. I didn't say that firm performance favorably or unfavorably affects capital structure. Are you with me? I said it affects. It affects, we don't know the effect. What does it mean? It means that I read the article which say one thing for sure, that firm performance affects capital structure. But some of them say favorable, some of them say unfavorable. Imagine a situation, I read 100 articles in the review of literature, and all of them say that firm performance positively affects capital structure. Then my hypothesis would be firm performance positively affects capital structure. But when I have a divided literature, some say favorable, some say unfavorable, then one thing I know that there is an effect, but I can't be confident enough to say favorable or unfavorable. In this case, I say, all right, the answer could be on the right side and on the left side, but there is an effect. It's like saying that you develop a drug and you experiment on some animals. Is the impact, does the drug affect? Then the question is, does the drug affect favorably or unfavorably to the patient? That's a different thing. You experiment some new drug on mice. Is it mice, mouse, Mickey Mouse, mice. Yeah. So when you experiment on mice, you find that all the mice are getting healthier than before. All, or at least 95%. We always believe in 95% rule. At least 95% are healthier than before. Then you can have confidence to say, yes, this drug has a positive impact. Or you find that maybe 30% mice have become healthier, 25% have become weaker, some impact is random, all right? You are inconclusive, but effect is there. Then your hypothesis would be this drug has an impact on health of mice. But you will not say favorable or unfavorable. Never claim anything which you don't have 95% confidence to prove. We use 95% rule in quantitative research. In some cases, like in my research, I use 90% rule. Anything which I'm confident 90%, I believe in it. Question is, how would you estimate this? You will study hopefully today. How this 90% or 95% come. But unless you have 90% confidence, you cannot claim which side. All right? So these are hypotheses, and where this hypothesis come from? These are different hypotheses. Because I'd studied many variables. These hypotheses come from the literature. More literature you study, better literature you study, more you have the power to claim something. If I read only 3-4 articles and make hypotheses, the first thing my supervisor would be super angry with me, and he or she would say that, hey, you read only 3 articles and you are making a claim. No, this is not acceptable. This is why the review of literature chapter, in my eyes, is the most difficult and the most important chapter of your thesis. It can make your research, the same data, same technique, same method, your level of research finding could be very high and very low, depending upon the type of literature you study. Okay? Because if you read the good literature, then your claims, your assumptions, like hypotheses, would be better. If not, inconclusive. It's like a shallow claim. And then this is the part which you will be doing. Data methodology. Now, please, whatever I said in the beginning, that what should be the contents of your methodology section, relate with this. So this is the number of, this is my sample size. The data source is this. The countries I took the data from. You can say if you have a survey and some of your respondents are in Uvascula, Kuopio, and elsewhere, why not mention them? This is some data I took from the books of the companies. Some data I took from the stock exchange, like NASDAQ, OMX stock exchange. The time period I took from 2003 to 17. But I split the periods into first phase 2003-6, then 7-10, and then 11-17. I can tell you the reason why I did, because I was studying something before financial crisis, during financial crisis, and after financial crisis. So that's why I have to divide the time periods in 3 parts. But that's not a compulsion on you. Sometimes you can also be having this kind of research that, hey, what was the impact of, what was the return on assets of Microsoft against TwoSoft 5 years ago and now? Has 5 years made some change? So in that case, you may consider to split the time periods into sub periods. Like, for example, I can say, what was the average life of people before World War II and after World War II? Something like this. In that case, there is an event. Event mean, in my research, the most important event was financial crisis period. What was before crisis and what was after crisis. So therefore, I have to split time period, but it's not something which you must do. You can consider it. All right. Then I give the variables I'm using. Well, I'm using company's capital, risk, profitability, company's growth, tax they pay. And here I write down because I can't write debt to equity ratio 10 times in my paper, can I? It will take a lot of space and the publisher will be very angry with me. So what I use, I express this variable into an abbreviation. So wherever possible, you can abbreviate, you can use the acronym, you can shorten your variable's name. So, but as long as you specify it. If I don't specify and suddenly instead of debt to equity ratio, I start using DE ratio, somebody would see, oh, what is this? What is this DE? But here I specify. And I also tell how I measure it. So once again, you don't have to learn it. I'm just giving you an example. This whole journey, the whole process will be different for you. Okay? But as long as you follow the same roadmap, systematic risk, again, the word is very big. I shorten it, and then I also calculate that I also show how I calculate it. So this is the description of the variables. And then I make the models, regression models, don't get scared, nothing to worry. This is very simple. So I put the regression model and that's it. So what I said so far, have the hypothesis, then come the information about the data source, data period. If you are having some sub periods, all right, how you define your variable, how you measure them, and then finally, how you put them in the form of some model, how you will test them. All right. For example, if your study topic is your study topic could be does advertisement and R&D affects the company's performance? All right, let's put it this way. Does the advertisement and innovativeness impact company's performance? Listen my title very carefully. I repeat, does company's advertisement and innovativeness affect performance? Which variables I mentioned in this title, in this hypothetical title? How many variables I used? Which keywords I used? I repeat, imagine I'm doing a research and my research title is, or my objective is, what is the impact of advertisement and innovativeness on company's performance? Three, I agree. Which are they? Can you do one thing? Can you do me a favor? Let's have a role play. If I go close to the chart, then I will not be able to catch. Could you have a marker and stand there? Can you become my teaching assistant for this honorary job without salary? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'll think positively when I give you grades. Okay. Please mention first variable. Write down the three variable in a horizontal way, so that there is some space between them. This gentleman is writing down the names of the variables. Innovativeness, very good. A little bit bigger. With the age, my eyesight is getting weaker. No. And performance, yeah. When I was young and handsome, then it was a different situation. All right. Can I ask you one thing? Not you, because you are now my colleague. Okay. Which variable affect which variable in this case? Can you say it loud? Wonderful. So we make a model that innovativeness and advertisement affects the firm performance. If I'm very ambitious, can I ask you, what made you say that innovativeness and advertisement impact the performance? Or let's put it this way: if this is your, please listen carefully. If you miss out this part, you will be completely lost. If your thesis title is the impact of innovativeness and advertisement on firm performance, what is your journey? What is your research journey? What comes first? How your journey start? Imagine you all are writing a thesis titled The Impact of Advertisement and Innovativeness on Firm Performance. Where does your journey begin from? Please explain the whole evolution process.
Maybe I will look what kind of advertisement.
But no, before, very beginning, yes. Before methodology. Now I'm talking more macro terms, more total terms, the full thesis process. It's very important to know these things because you all go through the same phases. Yes, boys. Never shy away from answering. If you give a wrong answer now, then you will not do the wrong answer in the exam. But if you don't give the...
I'm sorry, before the methodology, maybe just find information.
But I agree. But what made you interested to study this thesis, to do this thesis? It means there's some research motivation. What motivates you? Again, you have some prophecy? No. You are reading some literature because you are a student of business, you're a researcher. And one day you think that, hey, there are many factors which can affect the company's performance. I mean, if the labor power is trained, if the demand is there, if location is good, if company is having good machinery, etc., they perform better. Does advertisement have an impact? You question yourself. I say, yes, it may affect. It means that now your research objective could be, or research question can be, does advertisement influence the company's performance? But then you also find that, hey, you know what? Let's be clear. Those companies who are making very aggressive in advertisement, normally their growth prospects are very high. Otherwise, they would never do it. If you are a company who's selling some local bread in a village, right? Would you advertise? I mean, you will only advertise if your company, if you are selling bread beyond your village to towns, to cities, or maybe export. It means what? You have a growth orientation. You have a hunger for growth. And unless you innovate, you can never be a growth company. It means that the companies who advertise, they also have a itch to innovate. Because otherwise, by advertising, they would be able to create demand. But if their products are of poor quality, because of lack of innovation, nobody would buy them. So advertisement and innovativeness go hand in hand. And how do you have this kind of arguments? Well, you study literature. You can't speculate. You can't give your own, well, of course, you can give your arguments, but when you give the argument, then somebody can question you that has some previous researcher study the same phenomena? So these ideas you polish with the help of review of literature. And what comes after literature review? At the end, what comes at the end of literature review? Hypothesis. Very good. Hypothesis. And then your first hypothesis is that advertisement affects the performance of the company. Can I say advertisement positively affects the company's performance or negatively? Well, you can say if most of the literature you study is on one side, then you can use the sign also, positive, negative, favorable, unfavorable. But if you find that the literature is split, there are some studies which say advertisement leads to success of the company's sales, but there are some studies which also say that advertisement actually backlash. It doesn't create any. So you are not very sure. Your hands are tied. You want to claim something, but you don't have enough evidence. Right? Then you can say, oh, all right, at least one thing is there, that advertisement have an impact. So your hypothesis would be advertisement have impact on performance. And then the same way you can do with innovativeness. Then you come to the next chapter called data and methodology. What data will you collect if you're doing a quantitative research? You can also say historical data. All right. Historical data of what? Historical data of what? Which research field?
About this question, about this, about the
how do you measure innovativeness? I want to ask you, if you want to measure the company's innovativeness, how do you measure it? How will you measure it? Mm-hmm. Technology? It means that the company's investments. So if I see that, if I can get the data, how much they invest on machine, etc. Trademarks, know-how. Can I say intangible assets of company?
I think that we need to have an analysis about how the innovative and advertisement influence the performance. I mean, if we consider that the advertisement probably after an amount of money it's not be more useful to put money in advertisement as well. So we have to try to understand the amount of money that we need to invest in both of these categories.
That's a good point. So you are interested to know how much money you spend on advertisement and innovativeness. But the question is that before you start measuring it, you have to define them. How are you measuring innovativeness and advertisement? I mean, different people can measure innovativeness in different way. You can say how many new products they launched last year. Innovative. A company doesn't launch new product, not innovative. The company spend more on research and development, innovative. The one who don't, less innovative. The intangible assets, innovative, otherwise not. What else could be measure of innovativeness? How many trademarks, somebody said here. How many trademarks they have registered in the last 5 years? Innovativeness. So the question is that it's like the same thing that you want to measure the welfare of city of Uvascula. You can see it from schooling, health, education, road, shopping mall. In this case also, innovativeness is the variable. How you measure it, you have to give a strong justification. All right, agreed. I'm measuring innovativeness by the amount of research and development expenditure. Let's say. The question is that now you need to give a justification why you chose R&D and not the other measures. This also you have to justify. Okay. The next thing I want to ask you, if I say research and development expenditure as a measure of innovativeness, is it an absolute measure or a relative measure? No. When I say, if I take research and development expenditure is a measure of innovativeness, and I take for Nokia, Kone, Finnair, all the companies, is it an absolute measure or is it a relative measure? Huh? Is it an absolute measure or relative measure? What is the problem of absolute measure? Because the big firms, they spend more, but that doesn't mean that they're more innovative. Of course, they have a bigger size effect. We want to take away this size effect. Then you can make a new variable. For example, R&D expenditure divided by total assets. So what happens? Even though you're a small company or you're a big company, small assets, more assets, you all are treated equally because you calculate ratio. Because you calculate ratio. It's like the example I gave you, return on equity. So then you define that my R&D is a measure of innovativeness, but I'm using the relative measure of innovativeness. And then how would you measure company's performance, by the way? How would you measure performance? Remember, performance is a variable. The question is, what are the measures of this variable? Turnover, sales turnover, yes.
Revenue or share price.
Share price. Market share. Some company has 25% share last year, now 35%. Performance better. Good. So the same process will go through each variable. Of course, you cannot take all the measures. Rather, you must not take. But some measures you can take to check the performance of the company. And then you collect the data. The data you collect, as I mentioned, in my case, I collected data from stock exchange. In Nordic countries, it's called Nordic NASDAQ OMX exchange. Or I went to the company's reports and I got the data straight away from there. Then time period and so on and so forth. All right. The reason I make you come here was that for this thing. You said that I asked somebody question that who are depending who? And you said, I think, that innovativeness and advertisement affecting the performance. All right. Now I go there for a sec. So what you said was performance performance depends on advertisement and innovativeness. Well, one can also argue that actually advertisement depends upon performance. But why are you choosing performance depending upon advertisement and innovativeness? Because you did something called review of literature. That gave you idea that advertisement and innovativeness are impacting the performance. And then I can create, so this is depending upon these. These are variables, but these are independent variables. And this is called dependent variable. Thank you so much. So in this, as per this example, your performance is a function of advertisement and innovativeness. Look at, I use the word F function. It means what? Performance of the firm depends upon advertisement and innovativeness. Those who are impacting are called independent variable. We also call them explanatory variables. And those who is getting affected, in this case, is performance, is dependent variable. We also call it explained variable. All right. And this you can see here. You don't have to look what exactly is this, but these all are my independent variables. And there's a one dependent variable. Remember, in a given model, there have to be only one dependent variable. But if you want to take more dependents, then make a new model. Can you see here? In this model, there's something called D2E, depending, and in this model, there is something risk here. These are two dependent variables, but I can't take them together in one model. So I have to make a new model for them. You can take as many independent variables you can. But in a given model, you cannot take more than one dependent variable. Make sense? But if you want to try many dependents, all right, take more models in that case. So this is the process, that how we start and we end up at a methodology stage. So this is what you will be doing. You'll be doing something extra also, that you will be also talking about the findings, right? But this I'll explain a bit later. Okay.
Yeah.